Hello, and welcome back to One Trek Mind with me, Raptor.
And me, Michael.
And today we are getting away from controversial Star Trek series to discussing Star Trek in general. And this is our first video looking at a Star Trek video game. We are going to be looking, as if you've read the title, the Star Trek Voyager Across the Unknown game, which came out just before my birthday this year, back in March, and we thought we'd take some time to talk about it today. If you haven't played the game, we may be spoiling some things, so if you haven't played it yet and you're intending to, go buy it, play it, come back to this video. If you don't care about spoilers, that's fine, carry on listening.
And keep in mind, the spoilers are not plot-related spoilers because it is the
Star Trek
show.
Voyager. Yes.
So if you haven't seen Star Trek Voyager and you don't want spoilers, then keep that in mind as well. But if you have seen the show, you're not going to get spoiled from anything related to that.
Now, just briefly before we talk about this game, I just wanted to talk about Star Trek and video games in general, because Star Trek is one of those franchises, or one of the few franchises, that has essentially made a video game in almost every single possible gaming genre you can imagine.
And I have only played 2. Out of all of them that there have been, I've only played 2.
I think I've played about 6. There's been point-and-click adventure games. There's been terrible FMV full-motion video games like Klingon Academy. There's been real-time strategy games like Armada 3, which is one I've played. There's been grand strategy games like the fairly badly received Stellaris version that released last year. MMORPGs in the form of Star Trek Online, which me and Michael have both played. There's been first-person shoot-'em-up games in the form of Star Trek Elite Force, which I have also played. And there's been a smattering of different starship combat games, ranging from the arcade styles of the PlayStation 2 Star Trek Encounters and Xbox/PC's Star Trek Legacy, both of which I've played, as well as more cerebral titles like Star Trek Bridge Commander, which is, thanks to the modding community, still going very strong to this day. And of course, you have also the standard action adventure stealth / shoot 'em up game that were released for the 2009 movie as well, which was relatively critically panned. So Star Trek has kind of done almost everything. Oh, and I forgot Star Trek's Telltale game version. Was it Star Trek Resurgence, I think it is, that came out a couple of years ago?
Yes, a choice-based, branching path kind of game.
Came out in 2023, which we do intend to play at some point for the channel. So yeah, Star Trek has kind of taken quite a scattershot approach to video gaming. I think it's fair to say no Star Trek game has really been very successful. Some have been more successful than others. Star Trek Online is probably the most profitable Star Trek game there's been, but it's not necessarily a good Star Trek game.
I think it sucks, but that's just me. I really don't like it.
And I think, just as a brief point about Star Trek Voyager Across the Unknown, this is very much a Star Trek game, for both the good and the bad that includes. So, before we get into sort of the positives and negatives, Michael, how would you explain what this game is?
I would say it is a strategy game, a strategy RPG game that allows you to make your own leadership choices in scenarios that have been presented by episodes from the show, that is very heavy on resource management. It's like the most concise way I could probably think to explain the game.
Yeah, because the game is not easy to describe because it's a combination of 4 different sets of mechanics. You have a base building, manage your starship-esque mechanic, which is very similar to... Some people have been saying Fallout Shelter, but for me, I think it's more like XCOM and XCOM 2. You have a procedurally generated exploring space game mechanic, which is very much like FTL. You have a choices matter narrative mechanic, which is very much like any sort of choice matter narrative game that you can imagine. And then you also have a very arcadey style, simplified sort of Star Trek Legacy-esque starship combat simulator, all rolled into one game. And obviously, I think as me and Michael get into this, some aspects of this mechanical mashup are better than others. As a general point about this game to start with, I think this is the closest game I have played that feels like Star Trek.
Again, I've only played 2, so I can't really say my opinion based on any other games that I've played. The only other one is Star Trek Online, which to me feels not at all like Star Trek. It's very much a shoot 'em up kind of game, which doesn't seem to rely very heavily on like diplomacy or ethics or any of like the major ethos of Star Trek. This, I think, is way better in that regard. I really feel genuinely like I'm the captain of this ship and I am making choices for the crew, trying to make sure their morale is up, trying to make sure they have housing and food, and making sure we're, again, allocating our resources properly so that we can all survive together, and making diplomatic and combat choices when presented with a problem from another party. And it does genuinely feel like a sort of captain simulator. What would you do in this situation? What would you do in that? It's almost, obviously, like a much lesser degree. It almost feels like Kobayashi Maru the game, where it's just like, here's your situation. How would you approach this? And there's technically no wrong answers to it unless you get the whole crew killed or they mutiny against you. But it just feels right. It just feels very in line with what Star Trek is. And for that reason, I do quite enjoy this game, even though it is very outside my wheelhouse. Like, this is not the kind of game I normally play. I'm very much a single player, narrative driven focus kind of gamer. I like things like Ghost of Yotei or The Last of Us, or things that, again, have a very linear story to play. I'm not a big open world kind of person, even though I do play some things like that. I absolutely don't play strategy games. I don't play resource management games. So this is very, very new to me, but it did not take too much for me to pick it up, and it felt really good to be able to successfully navigate a star system, get the resources I needed, go and take on this new mission, potentially fail it or not fail it, see what my path as a captain was going to be for the crew of the Voyager. And I really liked it. I actually had a lot of fun playing it. I should clarify, I still haven't finished it, but I will be finishing it. I'm getting close to the end of the game.
And kind of opposite to you, I have finished it, and I'm a really strong management player game. I love games like City Skylines. I loved The Sims before EA ruined it. I love games with really strong management-focused mechanics. So this game was very much in my wheelhouse, and I was really impressed with a lot of aspects of this game. But something I think the first big point of mine, which I had written down here in my positives, this does a better job of feeling like, oh my god, we're lost in a part of space that we don't know anything about, than the show ever managed to accomplish.
I would agree.
Throughout the whole thing, you are forever worrying about your fuel. You are always thinking about food. You're always trying to get those resources. You are tempted to take risks just to get a little bit more resources because you know they're going to be needed. The game does a really good job of integrating the survival and resource management mechanics into its systems. That, in combination with the fact that pretty much everyone on your ship can die, even the named characters are capable of having completely grisly ends. In my very first playthrough in Sector 3, both Bilanas I had at the time, which will take some explaining, but both Bilanas I had at the time died horrible grisly deaths.
I got that same situation where both Bilanas died, and I was like, I'm restarting. I'm not accepting that. that. I can't. Normally, I don't do that when it comes to RPG style games because I'm like, nope, that's the choice you made. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for you. You just got to live with it. But I'm like, no, I refuse. I will not let B'Elanna die on my watch for redoing that.
Yeah, so the survival aspect is really, really strong. Definitely does a better job than the show ever did of feeling like your ship is barely holding together sometimes. One of my sectors that I left, I think I had about 3% health left after a really bad battle with the Borg, and I went into the next sector and I was like, my ship is being held together by duct tape and the hopes and dreams of the crew.
Yeah, again, I still haven't gotten into the final stages of the game. So for me, this will be a point of criticism I have for the game thus far, is that where I'm at currently, I don't think it's quite challenging enough. There are almost no combat scenarios or situations where I'm like, I felt really stressed out because I couldn't do it. I would say the resource management is more stressful than the combat. The resource management aspect of it, there was a section in the game where I was definitely struggling. I'm like, ooh, I don't have power for this or that or this. I don't have enough food. I don't have enough fuel. This is getting kind of hairy right now. This is not looking great. But I did manage to pull through without getting the crew to mutiny or we all died or anything. And there's almost no combat scenarios that I wasn't able to pretty easily handle. I should say I played it on normal mode.
The normal difficulty.
I didn't play it on the harder modes, which I'm sure would have made it more difficult, but still, I felt like even in normal mode, I was like, it's a little easy to make it through this. I think this game could have potentially done better with a bit more challenge. But at the same time, since this is a genre, or couple genres that I'm not familiar with and not used to, if it was that much harder, I don't know if I would have continued with it. I would have been like, I just don't get this. This isn't really my kind of game anyways, and I might have just dropped it. So maybe they did that on purpose to try and get more people to kind of gel with it. And if you are familiar with those genres, then play the harder difficulty and give that a try.
Which I have decided I am going to do a run of videos for the channel of me doing the game on its hardest difficulty, which is conveniently called Year of Hell. So that should be fun.
Good luck.
But another aspect that I think is really strong about this game is the exploration. Pretty much no Star Trek game I have played has ever really captured the sense of exploration that is such an important part of Star Trek's mythos. Whereas this game, with its procedurally generated sectors and focus on resource management and resource collecting, but also finding unique opportunities in those sectors, really pushes the exploration factor, because the way episodes from Voyager are integrated is that every one of the 12 sectors you pass through has a main mission, for want of a better term, which is based on a key episode of Voyager. So your very first sector, you are doing the entire mission of the Caretaker episode. However, you will find secondary missions based on smaller episodes. So just a couple that I encountered. There's one based on Voyager's first encounter with the Vidians. There's one based on the episode where Tuvok and Neelix get trapped in that space elevator thing.
I don't think I got that one.
They are available as side missions, and then there are some side missions based on episodes that the game doesn't tell you about that you kind of have to discover naturally. And it all, it pushes you to this, like, you do get rewarded if you go exploring and go looking around and don't just go from one to the other, which I think is really important for it to feel like a Star Trek game. Exploration is important to Star Trek.
Agreed. I would argue that is one aspect of the game that I actually think they could have improved upon quite a bit. I think every game you ever play is obviously going to have a gameplay loop. So some level of repetition of like, you do this, you do that, you do this, and repeat. And I think that's fine in order to get the player familiar with the mechanics and get better with them over time. However, I did take a little issue with this game going into certain scenarios where it's like, oh, you found a space station for a potential food source. Are you going to do this, this, or this? And it's the same scenario that they throw at you like dozens and dozens of times. And they'll do that with like a handful of different scenarios that they will just throw at you over and over and over again if you find them. And I think they definitely could have increased the amount of scenarios you can run into that aren't story related at all. Like, again, obviously there's a limit. It's all procedurally generated and you can't have a unique scenario every single time. I do get that. But I feel like I can count on my hands how many of those scenarios you get multiple times. And I would have preferred if they had expanded that a little bit, because it does get, to me, a little boring once you get to like your 15th time of finding that space station that potentially has food on it. And oh no, there's like some kind of alien organism that got released and killed all the crew. And it's the same thing over and over again. I'm just like, come on, like give me a few more scenarios to explore. And that is definitely one fairly big criticism I do have of the game.
The procedural generation is quite limited. It's trying to stick to positive stuff though for the time being. The other thing I would say that I think is quite good is this game doesn't feel like it's been dumbed down to appeal to a general audience, which, as someone who enjoys management games, a lot of management games lately, they are either highly simplified or they cut features out, trying to appeal to a wider audience, which gets especially frustrating for me because then you end up with a game with very lackluster game mechanics in it. The Jurassic World Evolution franchise springs immediately to mind here. But this game feels like it fully understands what the people are that it's aimed at. This is aimed at people that want this sort of experience. They haven't watered it down, massively overly simplified it. You've got various management screens available to you. You've got a very wide, expansive tech tree that allows you to design your starship in the way that you want and add the rooms to your ship that you want. And actually, that's another area I think is really good. The actual using Voyager's Master Systems display as your cut through of the ship, and you picking the rooms and repairing various systems and designing the ship your way.
I did like that aspect of it quite a lot, even if at times it was very frustrating for me, where I'm like, I want to put the hydroponics bay here, but I don't have enough space, so now I gotta clear a whole other deck, and it was frustrating in a good way. Okay, Now I gotta think here. I gotta think, maybe I demolish this room and apply what I want to put over here, and then I'll reallocate that over in this area. Do I have enough crew to clear out these decks in order to make the thing that I'm making? Or do I need to focus them on repairing the hull? I did like that aspect of it, even if at times it was frustrating, but as I said, frustrating in a good way, a way that made me genuinely have to think. And I think it's fair to say there's a lot of games nowadays that don't make you think at all. They're just like, just do the thing. Just press the buttons and do the thing. And it's at times that works, and at other times, you wish that it would make you think a little bit more.
And Voyager has finite space internally. And I would say the amount of space you're provided to build the ship in feels both enough and not enough. You are never going to be able to research everything on the tech tree. You are never going to be able to build every single room. You have to choose the direction that you want to take the ship, whether you go for a scientific focus, a survival focus, a combat focus, a morale
or evenly
focus.
Spread it across all and be kind of lesser in each of those categories as a result. Which I think does really increase the replayability factor of like, okay, I went for the science approach last time. This time I'm taking a combat approach. I think that definitely helps with the replayability factor.
It does. It's not all good. We'll get to some negatives in a second. I just wanted to ask you if you had any specific positive things you wanted to mention, since it's been mostly me so far.
This is going to sound maybe a little silly, but I actually really enjoy the almost... what's the word for that, actually? Hold on, give me 1 second. I guess the immersive quality of the game, even though it is very top-down or side view of every situation, you're not like playing a character walking around the ship, which I still think would make a fun Star Trek game. I would like to see that at some point. The fact that you can assign a certain officer to a certain area of the ship, and then you can zoom in on that section of the ship and you see them moving around in that area, it allows me to almost role play and imagine in my head like what's going on in there, and I do really like that aspect of the game. That's the one thing about open world games that I do like. Not the one thing, but that's one of the major things that I like about open world games, where you can just completely immerse yourself in this other thing and just imagine what it'd be like to live a day in the life of the character you're playing and everything. And that is one aspect of the game that I think clearly isn't the focus of the game, but it does really enhance the quality of it, in my opinion. It makes me enjoy it a whole lot more. Being able to zoom into the mess hall and see Neelix moving around and making food for people, or go down to the aerospace shuttle and see Kess doing diplomatic whatever, even though I think the diplomacy section of that aerospace shuttle is a bunch of bullshit.
Yes, that will be something I definitely get into. Something I think is really good is this is not a graphically intensive game, but I think it is...
It's got a nice style.
It has a nice style. They've done the lighting quite nicely for the external shots. The cutscenes are, in my opinion, acceptable. They're not going to blow you away or anything. This is not, Star Wars Battlefront 2 EA. But they're satisfactory as far as I'm concerned. I think Voyager looks beautiful. They've done
as
a
always.
Good job.
She always looks good.
They've done a good job renditioning the ship. But being able to zoom into each individual room and seeing everything working, and there's a lot of attention to detail to get the ship feeling right. There's one big area where this has been missed, which we'll get into in a second, but generally in terms of the look of the game, graphically I think it's really good. Like, the HUD is perfect, it doesn't take up huge amounts of the space, it's very easy to click through different menus, it's just all well designed.
Agreed. I totally agree with that, and again, I would like to see like a AAA level Star Trek game to come out where it's like super high fidelity graphics of a character you can control walking through the decks of the ship and everything. I would love that, but considering the budget they had and what they did end up producing, I think it's very solid. Like, it's really good.
Yeah, it should be noted this has been made by a studio of about 45 people on a shoestring budget, and the last game that these people brought out was the very lambasted Gollum game.
Wait, is it really? I didn't know that.
Yes, that was the last game they developed solely in-house, was the Gollum game, which they definitely misstepped on.
I mean, I don't know what you're talking about. That's a top 10 game of all time right there.
I feel like our Star Trek bridge needs a sarcasm alert.
I was going to say, I feel like some people are going to be like, what? It's obviously sarcasm, people. Calm down.
But yeah, so for a small studio on a shoestring budget, it is pretty impressive what they've been able to do. How did you find, I haven't put this in the positives or negatives because I wanted to have a chat about this, the away team mission?
I'm glad you brought it up. That is absolutely in my positives. It is one of my favorite aspects of the game. I love that it's not you shooting up people and like sneaking around or whatever the situation requires. I love that it is simply a prompt that says, here's your scenario and here are your 4 to 5 options as to how you want to handle this with whichever character you want to handle this. I think that is a great idea. It made for some very tense moments where, again, you had to strategically think ahead, like, okay, if I use this character now, they're going to be fatigued in the next section. So do I want to use them in this scenario, or do I want to save it for something else? And then you weigh the factors of their probability of success to their probability of failure. On top of that, I adore the artwork that they used during those sections.
Yeah, sort of watercolor-esque painted images. Obviously, they're probably all screen caps from episodes that have just been put through some sort of filtering process to look like watercolors. Although some are definitely not. Some are definitely unique to the game. But it is a nice art style. I have a criticism about that, though. Just briefly, when it comes to art styles, this game definitely can't decide on one. It switches between lots of different art styles.
Again, I like that though. I like seeing that they basically said, okay, like we could have one artist do all of this, or we could pick a few artists that have different styles and go with whatever they come up with. And I really like that. I thought that was really fun. I really enjoyed that. A lot of those away missions were genuinely tense for me because I'm like, ooh, I don't know what to do here. This is kind of stressful. I did really enjoy that aspect of the game. I thought that was one of the better aspects of the game for me.
Yep, in my second playthrough, Tuvok lost his lungs to the Vidians and then died.
Oops.
Whoops. So the away team style mission sort of system where it becomes basically a sort of narrative focused choose your own adventure. I liked it. The only bit about that specific mechanic that I didn't like was that you were told who you basically needed to bring.
I actually do agree with that.
I think it would have been better if you kind of had to either guess, figure out, think about it, or receive like a rough sort of briefing about this is kind of the situations we may encounter on this mission, and then you decide from the quite extensive crew. I mean, I found about 12 to... I think I've discovered 12 of the crew so far, and there's still a few I'm missing.
I missed a lot. But I do agree with that. Coming up with your own solution to basically a mission briefing that the captain gives you, like, okay, here's what you're dealing with. Who do you want to bring based off of your knowledge of what they are good at and everything? But the game explicitly tells you this first scenario requires either this or that, and the second requires this or that, and you know what you need, so you pick people accordingly. And I do agree. I think it would have been potentially a lot more interesting and stressful if they didn't, and you just had to come up with it on your own and think genuinely about what skills these crewmen are good at. And as a captain, who would you send down? Yeah. So I do think that is a misstep as well.
And that just brings me on to another small positive I wanted to mention. The sheer different crew you can gather for your ship. Like, you obviously have the important ones, Chakotay, Tuvok, Seven, Neelix, Kess, the Doctor, B'Elanna. But then you have lots of other crew you can gather for your ship. So I ended up with, in my first run, a duplicate B'Elanna but fully Klingon. The Romulan from the Eye of a Needle episode.
I missed that whole fucking thing because I was too late to get to the wormhole, and I was so mad at myself. I'm like, damn it, I didn't count it correctly, and now I missed
Discovered a Malon waste engineer who joined the ship. I had a Kazon join the ship, a Vidian. You had the guy that wanted to kill all of Voyager's crew because of the Borg assimilated his race.
Yep,
you got him to join your ship.
I brought him in.
So yeah, there's a lot of range of... Basically, if you're really familiar with Voyager, there's a lot of references and a lot of in-jokes and a lot of content from Voyager episodes that you're going to encounter that you're really going to enjoy. I mean, within the first 5 minutes or so, they make a joke about Harry Kim or there's a joke about Kim being promoted to captain someday.
Which he does eventually, but not in this show.
If you're a big fan of Voyager, you'll get a lot of the references.
Yeah, there's some really good ones in there for sure.
But it's not all good. There is a huge amount to criticize. There are some things that I think are a bigger problem than others.
Can I start?
You may start.
For me, the biggest criticism I have on this game is the combat system. I think it is very boring and very easy to manage your way through a situation. They say, do you attack, the front, the back, or either side? Do you want to target their engines, their weapons, whatever? And I feel like ultimately it kind of doesn't really matter. You just try to deplete their shields on whatever side you're hitting, then send a torpedo in, and you pretty much got it. Again, I'm sure on the higher difficulties it's a little different, but even still, you're only allowed to have 3 crewmen that you position in a combat situation. So you're like, all right, who am I picking? Like, what abilities do I want to use? Which to me doesn't make a lot of sense when, if you're in a combat scenario, why wouldn't you have every crewman at your disposal? And then you just pick which crewman ability would be best for that situation. And it's just, again, it's a little boring. Like, you don't control the ship or anything. You just click on which area you're attacking. It does it for you. And then you just select one of the 3 abilities to use at any given time when it's not on a cooldown. And then that's it. Like, I think it's a very rudimentary, too simplistic combat system. It's not very fun, in my opinion. It's definitely my least favorite part of the game.
It's obviously the bit where they had the least... It was given the least focus or the least time, which, you know, video game development is a question of compromise. I don't think the combat system is not fit for purpose, but it does the bare minimum, and that's all.
Yeah. I would agree.
Which is it's the only like major mechanic of the game that just doesn't really work very well. Again, I think graphically the combat is perfectly nice, but the combat system is definitely very, very weak. It's like Star Trek Online, but you don't fly the ship and you only have 3 abilities, and the ship fires automatically by itself. For me, though, the biggest negative is that it looks like Star Trek, feels like Star Trek, but doesn't sound like Star Trek.
How so?
They have not been permitted to use any of the licensed sound effects.
Oh, I actually didn't even notice that.
The phaser sound effect is wrong. The ship's warp, going into warp drive sound effect is wrong.
I did
The
notice
red alert sound effect is wrong. The only music track they have from any Star Trek show is just Star Trek Voyager's theme. They don't have any other music from any of the shows or Star Trek Voyager's music. You know, there's lots of sound effects when you zoom into various rooms on the ship. Engineering doesn't sound right. It's very clear that they haven't been given those licensed sound effects, which is very weird to me that Paramount would give them the authorization to make a Star Trek game, but not give them the
sounds to do
not provide them with the stuff to do so. Because you can go and find the sounds. Like, all of Star Trek Voyages is like computer sound effects and engine sound effects and stuff. You know, people have ripped them and they're on bloody YouTube. You can find music from the episodes on YouTube. So, you know, the stuff is there. They just weren't given legal access to it, which I find very odd. And the sound effect and the lacking sound effect leads on to what a lot of people that I've seen online have criticized the most about this game, which is the lack of voice acting.
Agreed.
I think people need to temper their expectations. This is a small game by a small studio. Star Trek Online, most profitable Star Trek game there has been, I think. They don't have a full Star Trek cast. You know, they've never got William Shatner back. It's taken them, interestingly enough, Star Trek Online being only the second longest running MMO in history, it's taken them years to get the actors to come and do stuff for them. The chances of any of the voice cast coming back for a very small, very limited budget production. Now, I think the fact that we got Tim Russ and Robert Duncan McNeil back to do Paris and Tuvok's log entries between sectors, I think we were surprised to get even that. So I think people need to temper their expectations in the voice acting regard. But that doesn't explain why we couldn't just have, again, ripped voice lines from episodes used to provide just the occasional voiceover line or quip or something for when these characters are talking or for when you do something. Again, thinking about the combat, you don't hear Tuvok's voice suggesting to you to fire or saying that you're firing photon torpedoes or that shields are down. It's some random miscellaneous crew member. And it strikes me as really bizarre that, again, there was a way around not having voice acting, but you could still find bits of voiceover that you could use, but it probably would be a legal matter with Paramount.
I mean, to me, the biggest one would be Kate Mulgrew as Janeway. I'm like, that is an actor I know for a fact has explicitly stated multiple times she is willing to jump back into that role whenever they ask her to do it.
I mean, she did for Prodigy, didn't she?
Yeah, she would love to come back and play the character again. And again, I think you can mostly attribute it to the fact that they had a small budget and they probably couldn't afford to pay her and their whole crew making the game. But for me, it's the one that is the most noticed. Like, as much as it's nice to hear Tuvok and Tom Paris having their logs in between each sector, I think it would have been better to hear the captain's log in between each sector. So, I think it is one of those situations where I'm like, it is what it is. They didn't really have the money to do it, but it would have elevated the game quite a bit to get at least a few of them to come back, more than just the two that they did.
So it leads to a game that's quite quiet, but I mean, if you stick an episode of Star Trek Voyager in the background, it's fine. Another thing I was quite critical of, the choice of the Star Trek episodes that they use for main missions and secondary ones sometimes feels a bit odd. Some main missions have had their episodes completely rewritten, so they're not really like the episodes as they are on TV. And the choice of what episodes are used for secondary missions does seem a bit bizarre. Like I said, one of the earliest ones you can encounter is the mission with Tuvok and Neelix being stuck on that little magnetic lift.
Again, I missed that one entirely, so I don't even know.
My problem is it's quite an inconsequential episode, really. It doesn't do very much. And in this game, it's quite an inconsequential episode to have done in the game, because it doesn't provide you anything significant for you moving on from there. There's definitely some missions that they choose to include here based on episodes, and I'm like, there are kind of more important episodes that you could have based missions on. Bride of Chaotica is an episode I think would have been quite interesting to see. That's not in there. Relativity isn't in there. In fact, the big Series 2 finale, where they end up back on Earth and they have to deal with, the where the Doctor gets his emitter from. That episode is not used. So it does feel a bit weird, the sort of choices they've made for what is and is not included. And that unfortunately affects the game's mechanical systems, because there are some things that you encounter which are extremely useful. In the second Spectre, you can get your hands on a Vidian surgical device if you play your cards right, which is super helpful all the way through the game. Like, practically every sector I was in, I encountered a need to use that surgical device. Same as the Dreadnought missile episode, the Cardassian missile episode. If you get the AI from that, which you can if you play your cards right,
I didn't.
also comes in handy down the line. But there's other technology that's kind of more or less useless to you, that doesn't really provide much help to you. So sometimes it does feel a bit arbitrary as to what they've picked to use. And I think this brings us to the Aero Shuttle.
What is the point of it? What is the point? Like, oh, here's your diplomatic mission. Like, we can trade you 500 deuterium for 10 bits of food. I'm like, why the fuck would I do that? Why on earth would I do that? Almost every single trade that is offered from that is a complete ripoff. Like, it is not worth it whatsoever. I found myself ignoring almost every single trade offer that was given to me, because why would I do that? Like, almost every situation was terrible.
You might as well turn the Aero Shuttle off. And which is really annoying, because being able to use the Aero Shuttle was something I was really excited about. But all it's there for is trade missions, and as you say, the trade missions are rubbish. And then on top of that, the aero shuttle doesn't get used. You know, you can't use it outside of that. Like, you can't, if you repair the aero shuttle, you can't then use the aero shuttle instead of a shuttlecraft, or use it as like a fighter to support Voyager in combat, which is weird considering the aero shuttle is more or less a runabout, essentially. So it's got pretty decent armament, but you can't use it as like a combat craft. It's just there to be diplomatic. And it's useless. Incidentally, thinking about episodes that are missing, the Delta Flyer is not in this game.
I figured I was just waiting to see it, because again, I haven't finished it, and that is disappointing to hear. I'm like, no, come on, the Delta Flyer was so cool.
I was pretty slow with my first playthrough, doing as many of the side missions as I could find, and I did not find the mission, the episode that it's based on, and I don't see anywhere in the tech tree to unlock it to build the Delta Flyer. So yeah, I do think it's not in the game, which, if that's true, is a massive missed opportunity. Like, why would you not have the Delta Flyer in the game? And of course, it then means that other episodes that were based around the Delta Flyer now
can't be in the game.
Aren't in the game, to the point where there's the mission that Captain Janeway goes on with the crew members that are doing quite badly, and she takes them off on their first away mission in the Delta Flyer. That doesn't show up. Well, it does show up, but it's completely rewritten. And this is where we come to my only criticism about the crew, and that is Captain Janeway is the only member of the crew that is 100% plot armor.
Well, yeah, you can't play her in any away mission. You can never send the captain on the away mission, which
she can't die.
Yep, she is just 100% there as your captain, which on one hand, I get it. If the captain dies and then you have to have Chakotay take over or something, that would require quite a few different branching routes that you would have to write, which I'm sure would cost a lot of money. So I somewhat understand it, but it's a little frustrating that in the show itself, does she go on all the away missions? No, but she does go on some of them. Like, there's some pretty big ones that she goes on. Like, there are episodes that are the main focus of a certain mission where in the episode in question, she went with them. And in the game, you cannot do that. You have to pick other people. And I'm like, again, I'm glad the game doesn't allow you to like Michael Burnham your way through it and have the captain go every single time. But I feel like there are some scenarios where they should have at least opened it up to like, sure, do you want to take her instead? Take the captain for this really important like diplomatic mission? Yes, I do. Thank you very much. And they just don't let you at any point. She is not a playable character at all.
You can't even to attach her as a hero to a specific room to give effects to that room. She's just pretty much only there as a character in occasional mission moments where you have her choose a particular path, which means there are some sort of theoretical what if scenarios that the game immediately cannot provide. Like, we can't do a what if Captain Janeway dies and Chakotay had to be captain.
Which would have been interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want Janeway to die. Obviously, she's my favorite captain. But still, that would have been interesting. I would have liked to see what that could have been like.
And it also removes a lot of the capability of the player to make some changes about their ship. Like, we don't get to choose between having Lieutenant Carey or B'Elanna Torres as chief engineer. The game automatically makes Torres the engineer regardless of that choice. Seska always buggers off. Like, you can't keep her around.
Isn't there a section in the game when you get her, like you finally pin her to the wall and you can potentially get her to rejoin the crew though?
Yes, later on down the line, but you can't stop her from escaping in the first place as well.
I think personally, I think that's okay. Because again, like, you have to have it somewhat follow the trajectory of the show so that it's familiar enough for you to be like, okay, I remember this episode. Now what would I do as a response to that? I think that's okay. And I do think it's kind of cool that at one point in the game, you can convince her to rejoin the crew and what that might be like. I absolutely didn't do that. I said, fuck you, bitch. You're going in the brig.
Yeah, and I mean, Kess doesn't leave the ship in this game. She stays on the ship the whole time.
I do like that. I don't like how in the show they wrote her out of it. Even if her relationship with Neelix, I'm not comfortable with that relationship they had in the show. I do think it's cool that they kept her around to see what else she could help with. I do like that aspect of it.
Yeah, like there are some aspects of it that I think are good, but the game definitely does feel occasionally like it's railroading you into a particular direction.
Yep.
And this brings me on to my biggest problem, which is it's really, really hard in this game to make quote-unquote the wrong choice and carry on. The game's sort of de facto you will fail in this situation if is the morale system. If the ship's morale drops too low, you fail the game instantly and you have to restart.
I must say, my crew, I don't know about anyone else's, I don't know if they've like passed it or whatever. My crew were a bunch of little assholes. Every single time I'm like, all right, we're going to go get these resources. We're going to get these resources. They're like, the ship's crew does not like this decision. You really need to leave this sector and get on home. I'm like, bitch, we're not going to make it home if we don't have the resources. Calm the fuck down and let me get the stuff. That drove me crazy. I was like, please, let me get the resources we need. Holy shit. Calm down.
And there are so many instances where whether you make the right, i.e. what really happened in the show choice, or the wrong choice, i.e. doing something that the episode didn't do, the response of that is always it either improves or degrades your morale. And inevitably, the way it's always presented is the episode choice gives you good morale.
Yeah, I do agree.
And
every single time you do that, yeah.
The choice, which is not what happens in the episode, gives you bad morale. And that means it's almost impossible to do a playthrough where you're a little bit not the perfect captain. Because you can't actually succeed properly, because the chances are you'll run out of morale. Like, you could probably artificially buff yourself if you focus really, really highly on making the ship a nice place to be, and doing all the holodeck stuff, and making sure they're always eating premium food, and going down the tech tree, which gives lots of morale buffs. But if you're playing a slightly more balanced experience, it's very, very difficult to do something outside of the direction the game obviously wants you to go down. I mean, one instance I had was I lost like 500 morale because I asked Tuvok to do a mind meld on someone. What is a perfectly reasonable thing to ask, but because it was not what the episode did, it was a negative choice.
I mean, is it a perfectly reasonable thing to ask? I don't know. When Spock did that was pretty fucked up. That was very akin to like sexual assault.
It was. I just think the game takes this position that every choice that the episode made is automatically the best choice. There's a little bit of nuance to certain episodes. Like,
I do agree with that. I question, because I know you took the different route just to see what would happen. Do you get negative morale if you let Tuvix live? Because I killed that bitch. I was like, goodbye. Goodbye.
And curiously enough, you get positive morale because Neelix and Tuvok coming back are seen as positive for the ship. If you leave him alive, you get negative morale, and because Neelix and Tuvok have died. And the death of key crew members is deliberately tied to morale drop.
I mean, I think that makes sense, but at the same time, you have a crew member right in front of you, the doctor, who is actively telling you that what you're doing is wrong and that you should let Tuvix live, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that you'd only get negative morale for that choice. Especially because in the episode, it's clear that Tuvix is making a lot of friends on the crew and is kind of establishing his place amongst the pecking order and everything. So yeah, I feel like that's a little disingenuous. It's basically saying you are being punished for not doing what the show did.
The game basically takes a very binary has a very binary morality system. Either it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. There's no middle sort of neutral ground to a lot of the choices it makes. Which on the one hand I think is a good thing, because it means the player is forced to make one of two choices instead of just going down the middle on the safe route all the time.
I mean, hey, politicians do that all the time. Why can't I?
On the other hand, it does degrade morality down to bad and good, and Star Trek has always been about, yes, there's bad and good, but there's also a big space in between. Any other specific negatives?
I mean, I already went through a few of them during the positive section. My bad. I was just kind of bouncing around here. I'm trying to think if there's anything really specific that I did not like. Oh, okay. I realize it's a probability system, and in some cases it's like, all right, you have an 80% chance to succeed here.
The RNG.
Which means you do have a 20% chance of failing, which, again, it's random. Like, maybe you do hit that 20% chance that you fail. But there are some situations where I'm like, are you fucking kidding me right now? Like, I think with the B'Elanna situation, because I had the Vidian surgical device, I had like a 90% chance to save her, and I rolled the dice. I said, all right, 90% chance, there's no way I'm losing this. And then they died. I was like, what? Like, there's no way. With a 10% chance I failed in that situation. Are you kidding me? And I will admit there are some scenarios where it just felt like the game was like, no, fuck you. And again, I do realize it's probability based. If there is a 10% chance you could fail, that means you can still fail. But again, there were other like little side missions where it's like a 2% chance for critical failure, and I still got critical failure. I'm like, dude, are you being serious right now? And it just got a little frustrating sometimes. I'm like, come on, man, what the hell?
Anyone who's ever played XCOM or XCOM 2, there's the in-joke from fans of those games for the boy howdy do these 95% chance to hit miss quite a lot. There was one instance where I did save scum it, I accept, but the chance to succeed was about 60%, and the chance to fail it was the other 40%. And I got a failure, I think, about 9 times in a row, which is extremely unlucky, I feel. RNG definitely feels, at some points, very weighted against you.
Yeah, there are just moments with that system that felt really unfair. Again, I know it's probability. It's probably not skewed in one direction or the other. The computer just so happened to be like, well, sucks to be you. You're getting the 5% chance of failure here. But I did get it consistently enough where I was like, ooh, what algorithm is this? Like, what are we doing here? This is pissing me off.
You know, it's just one of those things. Games of RNG can be very unfair sometimes. But it's definitely a flaw, I think. Or it's not necessarily a flaw, it's definitely something I think would turn people off. So, wrapping this up then, in conclusion, as it were. If I had to give this game a score out of 10, which I don't like doing, but if I was to give it a score out of 10, and putting this in the position of every other Star Trek game I've experienced, this is probably a solid 8 out of 10. If I was ranking it against other games, it would drop down. But in the view of Star Trek gaming as a whole, this is a very strong entry. I think it solidly knows its audience, Star Trek Voyager fans who love management games, and Star Trek fans in general. I think it did a really good job on a very limited budget. I think it picked a set of mechanics to mesh together that worked really well, and I mean, I could see Star Trek Enterprise versions of this, DS9 versions of this, Battlestar Galactica versions of this game using pretty similar methods and mechanics. I mean, I could even see this game having a sort of like procedurally generated hold on for like as long as you can, sort of just go as far as you can before you lose sort of game mode, which I think would be really interesting. So I think it's really solidly made. Yes, there are a lot of downsides, but Star Trek games in general have always had lots of downsides.
Some much worse than others.
Some worse than others, admittedly, but no Star Trek game has really kind of been a very good Star Trek game. And I think if you can overlook some of the very obvious glaring faults, like the lack of voice acting and audio being a bit incorrect here and there, and if you can temper those expectations over like what the game looks like graphically and how it plays, I think this is a really enjoyable experience for a Star Trek fan, and especially for a Voyager fan.
If I had to give it a score out of 10 based on other Star Trek games I've played, which is only one, I would give it a 9 out of 10 easily. I'm like, again, it's not perfect, but it is really, really good compared to the other one I played. If I rated it compared to other games that I've played, I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10.
I think it's fair.
I'm like, again, it's very outside of my wheelhouse. It's not quite what I'm used to playing, and I do think there are some pretty significant flaws in the game. But I think what they gave us is very enjoyable. It's very fun. I think one, other big critique I would have on the game is if you are not a Star Trek fan and you are not a Voyager fan, I don't think this game is going to work for you. Like, I really don't think this is going to appeal to a really broad audience, which, again, for all the issues I have with the games in Star Trek that are about like first-person shooters and stuff, because I think that is so antithetical to what Star Trek is, I think those do apply to a wider range of audiences more than some of the other Star Trek games. And this, I don't think really helps that argument. Again, my friend Brian, who I'm just now getting into Star Trek, he's still not like 100% sold on it, but I've now shown him, don't hate me for this, I've shown him Picard, and I've also shown him Starfleet Academy. He's enjoying the series overall, but he's not like 100% sold on it, and he's played tons and tons of video games. Like, it's a very online multiplayer kind of video game person. If I told him to play this game, he would absolutely not like it. Like, he would just not be able to get through it at all. And I think that is the case for a lot of people who are not Star Trek fans. So I think that is definitely a flaw of this game. But at the same time, I like that they appealed to people who do like Star Trek and this show in particular. Like, it feels like a game that was made for me specifically, which I do really like. So again, there's a little give and take on it. Like, yes, overall, I'd probably give it like a 6 out of 10, but I enjoyed it a lot. I am absolutely going to continue playing it and probably do a second playthrough on it just to see what else I can do with the game. It's just the fact that I don't think this is going to appeal to a very broad audience, which in the end, I think is going to detriment the game, but I think it's good. I do really like it.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the game has been received. Let's have a look. Metacritic and OpenCritic are giving it about a 77%. And apparently, from the developer, they have reported that within the first 4 days of it going on sale, they sold 100,000 copies, which is, for a small Star Trek game, I think that's fairly good going.
Not bad, but again, if you compare it to anything that's AAA, not good at all. Like, I know that's unfair to compare a small developer to a AAA developer, but again, you compare that to...
I'm just seeing what SteamDB says about its launch figures. So it had the peak player count on launch was nearly 10,000 players, according to Steam.
Right. But again, you compare that to a AAA game developer. I'm just going off of Ghost of Yotei right here, which, again, a lot of people didn't even want to buy because it was, Ghost of Woktei, or whatever bullshit they came up with. That sold 3.3 million units in its first 32 days. So it's a pretty significant difference. Again, I don't think that at all says this game is not good. It just kind of proves my point that if you're not going to be on the level of a AAA game, obviously you're not going to sell as many copies, you're not going to reach as big of an audience, which again, I still say isn't a bad thing. Like, there are tons of indie developers out there and smaller studios that are developing incredible games, arguably better games than AAA developers are. But again, it's just not going to reach that audience that would really turn the tides in terms of people really caring about like a Star Trek franchise in a video game.
I mean, going on off of Steam charts' figures here, it's had the best launch of any of their major Star Trek games that are available on Steam.
That's great.
I love that. Including Star Trek Resurgence. I mean, according to this, yesterday, it had nearly 1,000 players that were playing it yesterday. Compared to Star Trek Resurgence, which yesterday had 91 players.
Ooh. That's not great.
And Star Trek Online, now obviously Star Trek Online has its own proprietary thing, but if we go off Steam's figures, only had 1,700 players. So Star Trek, so Across the Unknown has certainly, at least from the figures I can see, has had a good launch for a Star Trek game. So
which again, I think is great. I love that. Idea.
And you know, if that leads to more Star Trek games, that can only be a good thing. Because frankly, I am so tired of Star Trek Online being the only one that seems to be the considered successful one. There have been so many Star Trek games, and the fact that like the only one that's put on a pedestal is this really terrible MMORPG that has so many problems. And at some point we'll have to do a video on Star Trek Online, because I want to bash that game around with a bat sometimes.
I would like to do that as well.
So, if you've played Voyager Across the Unknown, let us know down in the comments what you think about it, what you thought of the positives, what you thought of the negatives. If you haven't played it, are you going to go and play it? I mean, in this video, I will have shown you lots of footage from the game. So, you know, if that's convinced you to go and play it, do let us know. And maybe also, it would be interesting to know, and I think we could do a video about this at some point in the future, what would our perfect Star Trek game look like? So if you guys have any thoughts about that, let us know down in the comments. If you enjoyed listening to us ramble about this Star Trek game, don't forget to like the video, and please consider subscribing to the channel as we move on to talking about general Star Trek topics and just having a laugh about Star Trek. But until next time, it is goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.